mom. It's her going into the house.
She walks in. That was it.
A mom is missing. This beautiful blonde, very young and vivacious woman.
Everybody was starting to reach out, and nobody had heard from her.
I've tried messaging her. I've tried to call her on Messenger.
Police had to look at those facts and say she could just be off the grid right now.
We don't have a crime scene. We don't have an obvious crime.
There's no body, there's no murder weapon.
Right here, right here.
Yeah.
It's gonna look like he's dragging something. What the hell did you just watch?
Billings, Montana, 2018. The fiercely independent city on the edge of the Rocky Mountains is in the middle of an economic boom. It's here that 49-year-old Laura Johnson has come to experience her own independence after years of raising her children.
Yep. Yeah, that's probably the best picture of my mom. All I know is my mom got some 80s hair going on, and my dad actually has a full set of hair. Seeing all of us as an actual family, holy smokes.
Laura grew up in Vancouver, Washington, and met her future husband Howard there when she was 18.
By the time my mom was 23, she had 5 boys. She loved the fact that she was a mother. She always told us, I would never regret having all of you kids. She was extremely loving, and she was amazingly funny as well. And she gets that from her dad, who's just a jokester at every turn.
She was a wonderful mom, always helped with everything, always treated everybody like their family.
My dad worked the regular 9 to 5. Mom stayed at home, raised the kids. She was very nurturing.
She did everything. Every night she'd cook dinner. And for the amount of people that we had, I felt like it was a lot, but she made it look always easy, so.
She always made it a deal to have a good meal. Big old feast. My entire career has been in food service, and that's mostly due to the fact that I grew up cooking in the kitchen with my mom.
But in 2012, their children grown and out of the house, Laura and her husband Howard separate, and Laura moves to the Las Vegas, Nevada area.
I definitely think she wanted to find her own sense of happiness. You know, a woman in her 40s, having that for the first time, that's gotta be empowering, you know what I mean? So, she did tell me that she had joined a dating app.
And it isn't long before Laura meets someone she really likes. His name is Greg Green.
Greg was one of the people who she was matched with. He worked in Vegas right there. They went out on a couple of dates, and then it went to the point where she was living with him in Nevada.
Although she now lives 1,000 miles away from her family in Vancouver, Washington, Laura keeps in regular touch with her sons.
My mom was never really good about keeping a cell phone. So our main points of communication were Facebook.
She was consistently on Facebook. Like, you can click on Messenger and her little thing would be green.
In July of 2018, Greg Green gets a job in Billings, Montana. Laura follows him there in August, and soon after, she lands a job at a Papa John's restaurant. After her first day at work, Laura calls her son, Stephen.
I remember the last time that I talked to her on the phone was when she was driving home. It was literally just, talk to each other, see how life's going, have some laughs. But it's not until you look back, you wish you did more with your time, you know?
On September 18th, 2018, Laura's sons become concerned that she's stopped communicating with them.
My older brother, Howard Jr., he spoke to my mom every day. He called me and said, "Hey, have you guys heard from Mom?" And I haven't heard from her. I looked on Facebook. It said that she hadn't been active for a couple days. So then I called Steven. I was like, "Hey, have you talked to Mom?"
Jonathan called me on the 18th. The fact that Jonathan had even called me in the first place was a huge red flag. Because if there was a way to get a hold of her, he totally could have, you know what I mean? But now he's at the point to where he's like, I need help. I called my mom, and every time the phone was straight to voicemail. I've tried to message her, I've tried to call her on Messenger, I've tried to call her job, and the job is just like, yeah, she hasn't shown up for work since September 13th. Like all of this, and I'm coming up with nothing.
Nobody had heard from her.
I called Greg. He picked up. He says, came home from work on the 13th, and she was gone. All of her stuff's gone. All of it. I don't know anything. He doesn't know where she is.
September 24th, 2018. Laura's sons had been trying to reach her for 6 days.
So then I started calling the police department out there.
We asked the Billings, Montana Police Department to do welfare checks.
Officers went to Miss Johnson's residence to attempt to make contact and speak with her. The gate was locked. There was 2 large dogs in the yard. They weren't friendly. The house was quiet, and they weren't able to make any contact. Officers went to Miss Johnson's work and was advised that her last day of work was on the 13th, and she had not been to work since then.
Detectives tracked down her boyfriend, Greg.
When officers spoke with Gregory, he told them that on the 13th he had gone to work. And when he returned that day, he found that she was gone and she had packed her 2 red suitcases that she had brought with her and had left. The majority of people that contact police departments looking for their loved ones or wanting welfare checks done, those people are found eventually. You know, maybe they did go on a vacation and they didn't tell somebody. I think a lot of people, with the fast-paced life that we have, people want to take a break, they want to disconnect from life, and that can be something you have to take into consideration when looking for people.
What the law enforcement officers told me was, you are telling us that she's missing. We're not saying wrong, but we don't have enough information to say that you're right. The fact that it was a grown woman, people believe that if they aren't being found, it's because they don't want to be found. And anybody who knows my mom in this situation know that that's fundamentally not true. So the sense of like, something's happened became very real.
It's been 13 days since anyone has had any contact with Laura, and her family is getting anxious.
I posted a picture of my mom, and he said, "We have not heard from my mom." And just to explain the situation, a lot of people commented on there.
The post was getting a ton of shares. I thought that the whole thing was just strange. The fact that, you know, her sons haven't heard from her. We don't know where she is. She hasn't showed up to her job yet. She's not responding to text messages. The first thing that I do when I see something like that is I do reach out to law enforcement.
September 27th of 2018, I did receive a call from one of the local reporters regarding a Facebook post involving Laura Johnson. So the next thing I did after I got off the phone was started to research the case. While we haven't reached the level that there was a crime committed, things were starting to fall in place that not everything was right.
Investigators find baffling clues in Laura's disappearance.
There was a recent phone ping from Washington that showed that the phone had been there on September 26th.
And learn of a troubling past.
She had a prior addiction, and she could just be off the grid right now.
I'm not just gonna sit here. So the next logical step was to go to Montana.
September 27th, 2018. Laura Johnson's family has not heard from her in 2 weeks. Her boyfriend, Greg Green, tells police he hasn't seen her since September 13th, which was also the last day she was at work.
At this point, it's still unknown where she's at, unknown if there's foul play involved. We just had not gotten any information conclusive one way or the other.
Police ask Laura's son, Stephen, if there is anything going on in her life they should know about. Stephen tells them that years before, she was injured and that she became addicted to prescription painkillers. But at the time of her disappearance, she was getting treatment and doing well.
There was a feeling that potentially she may have relapsed due to her addiction.
Police had to look at those facts and say, well, she does have a history of use. She had a prior addiction, and she could just be off the grid right now.
Detectives reach out to the clinic where Laura has been going for treatment.
The clinic advised me that she had been there every single day for 3 weeks prior to the 13th.
Investigators subpoena Laura's phone records, and when the data comes in, there's a glimmer of hope that Laura is alive and well.
There was a recent phone ping from Washington that showed that the phone had been there on September 26th.
Detectives wonder if Laura went back to her hometown of Vancouver, Washington, where her sons and ex-husband live.
From an investigative standpoint, it made sense because that's where some of her support network would be.
Sergeant Billings called and said, I got some great news for you. I was like, oh, she did show up in town. I got excited.
Laura's sons immediately start searching all over Vancouver for her.
Me and my wife drove around for 2 hours to every business that was open, showing pictures of my mom, asking if anybody had seen her. So I was like, if she's in town, she's obviously would be at one of the hotels for sure. None of the hotels are like, nope, haven't seen her. Nobody's seen her. Not a single person.
Laura's sons are disappointed that there is no sign of her. Then they get disturbing news. The investigators made a mistake when tracking Laura's phone.
When they pinged my mom's phone, they pinged the last incoming call, and it was my dad. And it was on his birthday, because he spoke to my mom every year on his birthday. He knew everything that was going on, and he's like, well, it's my birthday, so hopefully she answers.
Laura never answered that call, and detectives realized that she was never in Vancouver. It's been 18 days since Laura Johnson disappeared, and her son Stephen decides he has to take action.
And being all the way in Washington and realizing that I wasn't gonna get an answer, that was the next logical step, was to go to Montana. I was like, I'm not just gonna sit here.
I couldn't let him go alone.
They said to themselves, we're gonna just get in the car and we're gonna drive 14 hours over to Billings, and we're just gonna go look for her ourselves.
So the first place that we went was the police station. And what they tell us is, as long as I didn't break the law, I could do anything. I had inclinations about who the person Greg was. And none of that ever sat right with me.
Stephen calls Greg, looking for more details about the last time he saw his mother.
He picked up, it was him. You know, who are you? What is this? Hangs up the phone. So I went to his house. I was yelling my mom's name. I'm yelling Laura. I'm yelling Mom. I think that she's in there. And then that's when he lets the dogs out. So I go up to the dogs and they're loud, but they're not dangerous at all. So I just bent down and started petting the dog, you know. And that's when he came out of the trailer and lights a cigarette and he's, you know, can I help you? And I tell him, I was like, I'm Stephen Johnson. Like, Laura's my mother. I believe you know where she is and I would like you to tell me. And he's like, no, I came home and she was gone. He's very cocky. And he's just standing there smoking his cigarette. As I told him, I believe you know where my mother is. I will be the one to put you behind bars and I'll be the end of you. So he tells me to leave and he calls the cops on me.
October 1st, 2018. Stephen Johnson has driven from his home in Vancouver, Washington to Billings, Montana to try to find his missing mother, Laura. After a disturbing encounter with Laura's boyfriend, Greg Green, Stephen's next step is to create flyers and post them all over Billings.
When we went anywhere, we handed these out. So we went to Greg's work and we put them all over his window at work. And then he tore them all off.
We were like texting, we're like, all right, has anybody heard? Anybody heard? Like, we want to know, like, what's going on?
We woke up 8 o'clock every single morning with a place to go to, an idea in mind, with somebody to talk to just try to find something. So at the end of every day, I'm calling my brothers, telling them, here's what we did. Here's who we talked to.
It was very frustrating because this is like what you see on TV. I never thought in my life I would ever go through it.
One of the hardest things for me was dealing with the frustrations with the family, understanding their concerns, understanding their desire to have, you know, swift justice.
We can't just go to Mr. Green's residence and knock the door in and do a search without a warrant. We've got proper legal procedure. And at that time, we were lacking enough information to use the search warrant process in order to further develop Ms. Johnson's case.
It was frustrating not being able to get a real reaction. So it just felt like our duty to prove it.
We've talked to everybody who we can. We've been to the doctor's office. We've been to the Salvation Army. Everything comes up empty. We had gone through every single dead end. We had been through all of Greg's neighbors with no answer, with no solution. We were nowhere closer on day 5 than we were on day 1. And the last thing before we leave town that we figure we can do is go knock on the neighbors' houses again.
As they are knocking on the door of the neighbor across the street from Greg, Stephen sees something he hadn't noticed before.
I basically stopped and I said, hey, I think we found something. There is a camera at the one place that we're interested in.
It points right at the driveway of where Greg and Laura lived.
Stephen and Casey had talked to the owner a few days before. Now, they ring his doorbell again, hoping to get access to the footage.
And the first thing he says is, "Do you want to see?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "I have my camera footage pulled up because you were asking me about your mom." He invites me in, and for the next like 35 minutes, I'm just on his floor looking at a bunch of video. So the first thing we pull up is September 13th, the last day she went to work. And then Casey's recording it on her phone. You could speed it up. So we're going through. So we're watching the camera footage. And then this is where it gets very interesting. It's him. Right here.
Keep playing.
What happens is Greg gets home first. Greg gets home and parks his truck and goes inside. And 35 minutes later, right here. Oh! My mom gets home. Right there. So that's mom.
Blonde hair.
It is 7:07 on September 13th.
God looks excited
That's
to
her.
see her.
It's her going into the house. We were told time and time again that Greg's story is, I came home and she was gone. I came home and she was gone. She had taken all of her stuff and it was gone. So we got him. He was lying. But, well, where is she? So we're watching the footage. Day turns to night.
What time is it?
Right now,
11:27? 10:27?
10:27.
There he is. The headlamp?
Headlamp on. We see Greg throughout the entire night. Right here, right here.
Yeah.
It's gonna look like he's dragging something back. Just moving. Going back and forth between the house.
That's when we call the detectives, like, you need to come see this.
Stephen Johnson has discovered home security footage of his missing mother, Laura. It shows her at the house she shared with Greg Green after the time Greg told police she had left. Realizing the importance of the discovery, he calls the police.
Approximately 10:45 that night, I go to that neighbor's house and we watch the footage in question. We then start viewing the video in greater detail. And it was definitely very concerning.
The detective's trained eye spots something that Stephen and Casey missed.
The footage shows the area of the driveway where Laura Johnson is observed coming home that evening, and she's exiting the vehicle and walking toward the trailer. Gregory, he's also seen going back into the garage and coming out with 2 red-colored suitcases in that vehicle as well.
The same 2 red suitcases that Greg told officers that Laura had taken with her when she moved out. And then, the detective sees something that changes the investigation from a missing persons case to something much more disturbing.
And you can see him walking out with that large, heavy object. that's zoomed in to show that area of the vehicle where he puts what we believe is Laura's body into the vehicle. And then ultimately he's observed putting a shovel in the back of the pickup bed before he leaves that evening just after 7 p.m. We believe that more than likely that is her body, but we need a lot more evidence to prove that at this point. That was kind of a gut-wrenching feeling to know that you just observed somebody's last moments.
What the hell did we just watch? The only logical answer is, Greg ended my mother's life that night. And finally dawns on me, like after all of this, that I'll probably never get to see my mom again. Is that I'll never get another goodbye. I'll never get that closure. I'll never get the last I love you. I'll never get any of it. It's just gone.
But unless police can prove that it is Laura's body on the video, they don't have a crime. On October 5th, 3 weeks since Laura was last seen, Billings police asked Greg to come into the station for questioning.
Gregory told us what he had initially told officers. He told us that on the 13th, when he got home that evening, she was gone and her 2 red suitcases were gone.
In that video, it shows Greg pulling those suitcases out of the house and packing them up in his truck.
He seemed very surprised when we told him that there was video, and then he decided that he didn't want to talk to us anymore. We informed him that he was not going to be allowed to go back to his home. We believed that that was a crime scene at this point. The vehicle he drove to the police department was impounded at that point.
We have now crossed into full-on criminal investigation. We do believe a crime has committed.
We had probable cause at that point to seek a search warrant for his residence. But we didn't have enough information to that point to make an arrest. We executed that search warrant that evening and began to process the trailer where Gregory and Laura lived. One of the first things that we noted was the strong odor of new carpet smell. In the back room of Gregory's home, it was obvious that the carpet had been replaced very recently, and that was suspicious to us.
But because police find no proof that Laura is dead, they have to release Greg.
At this point, we still don't have a body. We still haven't located Miss Johnson. There was not enough to arrest Mr. Green for the disappearance of Miss Johnson.
It's a crushing blow to the family.
After them basically telling him, hey, we know you're lying, they let him go.
The entire family was really upset because you have all this video, but you don't arrest him. Why?
There's a lot of frustration, but I would say it was mainly based around this guy did all of this and we could just see right through him.
We work closely with the county attorney's office and trying to determine, what more we need to get to that point to make an arrest. I had to remain focused on what needed to be done to build a case against him.
While the forensics team examines Greg's seized work truck, detectives have a strategy to keep an eye on Greg.
One of the last things we did when we searched the residence is we placed a tracker on his vehicle. We believe that he did more than likely take Laura's body to some location to bury her. We placed the tracker on with the hope of he might go back out to the location.
The tracker is placed on Greg's personal car, the same one that Laura is seen driving on surveillance video on September 13th. On October 5th, hours after his interview with detectives, Greg Green starts to move.
And at approximately 10 p.m. that evening, his vehicle started to move towards the interstate, heading west outside of Billings. So we began to follow him. He drove straight through the night, and we realized that he was leaving the state.
October 5th, 2018. Greg Green is the prime suspect in the presumed murder of Laura Johnson. Lacking evidence of a crime, detectives have to let Greg walk free. But they have placed a tracker on his car, and he appears to be leaving Billings, Montana, in a hurry.
His vehicle started to move towards the interstate and heading west outside of Billings.
Detectives track Greg as he drives for 16 hours across 5 states to his old hometown in Henderson, Nevada.
If you're being interviewed by police about the whereabouts of your ex-girlfriend and you just hightail it out of town, it's not a good look.
We were coordinating with law enforcement where he was at. They knew that we were tracking him. They would do drive-bys, make sure that we knew his whereabouts.
Meanwhile, Billings police continued the search for evidence to arrest Greg. Using his cell phone data, they track Greg's movements during the night of September 13th, which leads them to the local Walmart.
We were able to locate footage of him going to Walmart that evening. And when he went through the self-checkout, we did see a very distinct abrasion on his face, which we thought was very suspicious at that point.
Then, another crucial piece of evidence emerges from the forensic search of Greg's impounded work truck.
I noticed that the vehicle was very clean. It had been washed recently. So after 2 days processing that vehicle for biological material, taking swabs from various locations on the seat, we found 3 very, very small 1 to 2 millimeter stains that appeared to be blood.
That evidence came back from the crime lab, and sure enough, it was Laura's blood.
The totality of all of the evidence that we had located, including the blood on the door of that truck, and together with video footage showing him carrying out what we believed was Laura's body, at that point there was enough evidence to arrest him.
Hey, Greg.
I remember you.
You remember? All right. So you know why we're here?
I imagine so, yes.
Okay. So,
Something changed or something like this, or?
well, we have a warrant for your arrest for deliberate homicide. So that's what's changed. That's why you're here in handcuffs,
Okay.
and you'll be extradited back to Billings
Huh.
for deliberate homicide.
Deliberate homicide. Deliberate homicide.
Do you want to tell us what happened with her when she came home that night and what you did with her? That's your decision. I'm not going to press you. That's what I want to know.
I did everything that I know already.
Okay, well, we both know that's not true. So if you don't want to talk to me, we'll end that there. Okay.
After being held for 7 months in a Nevada jail, Greg is extradited to Billings. More than a year later, in February 2020, his trial is set to begin. But without Laura Johnson's body, a conviction is far from a sure thing.
We had a theory of what we believed happened, but we just didn't have a body. This is the very first case that I've ever had that involves a no-body homicide arrest. When you're trying to convict somebody of deliberate homicide and you don't have a body to go along with that, it can be very stressful.
What is your evidence? Can you really make it stick?
Drugs, surveillance video, and murder. Testimony begins in the trial of a Billings man accused of killing Laura Johnson.
We sat right behind him the entire time. I was not happy at all.
He was not taking anything seriously. I don't know if he was just in disbelief, like this is really happening, so he just kind of like went numb to it.
He maintained his innocence the entire time, even though there was video being played in the courtroom of him carrying what appeared to be Laura's body out of his house.
The evidence in this case will show you that the defendant took great lengths to cover up his murder of his girlfriend, Laura.
Prosecutors present jurors with a possible motive for the brutal murder. Laura was about to permanently end her rocky relationship with Greg.
One of the things we did learn from the trial was she had moved into a separate bedroom and she was saving money to try to leave.
He acted like he was at home sitting on his couch. And yeah, he didn't care whatsoever. He thought he was like at home watching Netflix or something.
He knew exactly where the cameras were from news media. There was a moment where he turned around, looked into the lens of our camera, and gave a little smile.
Greg's behavior at the trial only adds to the heartbreak felt by Laura's family.
That if this situation didn't happen, like I could have had my mom back. She would have been living in my town. She would have been. She would have been here. It's not fair.
How will this trial pan out without evidence of Laura Johnson's body?
This case has had so many unanswered questions. It's had so much heartache with it. And there's no body, there's no murder weapon, there's no evidence that shows he actually killed her.
Two years after Laura Johnson's final moments were captured by a home security camera, a jury in Billings, Montana is set to decide whether her boyfriend, Greg Green, is guilty of murder.
This trial lasted, 2 weeks? Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day. Didn't leave that city hall building for 2 weeks, basically.
That footage was the critical piece in the investigation and in the trial. It was a piece of evidence that the jury actually got to take back with them to deliberations, to view.
You can't escape the silent witness. You can't escape that video surveillance.
Any person with common sense to see all the evidence, and especially the video, would know he was guilty. I just got home the day before, and Steven called and said, hey, they have a verdict already. We're headed back.
The jury was out maybe 2 hours.
You don't know. You put 12 people in a room to make a decision and hope it's the right one.
To the charge of deliberate homicide. Guilty.
Ultimately, he was convicted of deliberate homicide. And he received a sentence of 100 years in the Montana State Prison.
In my 16-year career, this is the first case I've been involved in that went from a welfare check to a missing persons to a homicide without a body to a even prosecution of a homicide without a body.
And the fact that the contribution that we had was as impactful as it was, that's where the bittersweet part comes, you know? Had to extend ourselves that much.
Go through something you could never prepare yourself for.
Exactly.
If he didn't do that, then we would still be searching.
One of the key pivotal moments here was the persistence from family, and then Ms. Johnson's son coming to Billings and locating the surveillance footage. And I can only speculate, if that video had not been located or recovered, I'm not sure where we would be now.
Today, Stephen and his brothers are focused on keeping their mother's memory alive.
My mom was a part of my life every single day. I got married last year to my beautiful wife, Casey here. We had our daughter, Eliza, and Eliza's middle name is my mother's name. So her name is Eliza Laura Johnson. Big part of how my mom was as an everyday mother is the ways that I've been able to cope with her loss. So making the meals that she made, having the family dinners, you know, bringing her into my life in those little ways to keep her alive. That's what I do. She's there every time I make dinner, you know?
The only thing I have that I can hear her voice now is April 2018. She called me, but I was at work, and she left me a voicemail to tell me happy birthday. That's the only thing I have to like hear her voice.
Mike's first apartment in New York City.
The online dating scene was still pretty new and fairly unregulated.
I've been single for like 5 years. I lived in Long Island forever. All of a sudden I'm in Brooklyn, I moved, and everyone's like, oh, what are you doing? Do you want to hang out? I thought you want to hang out. You know, it's like, no, I can't hang out. I'm in Brooklyn. You know, I moved here to find a husband.
Numerous calls come into 911 stating that someone's been struck by a vehicle on the Bell Parkway. Those last seconds of his life were seconds that he didn't deserve.
I was just shocked. Just kind of go through this point of disbelief.
It was Michael Sandy. It could have been anyone. They weren't looking for a black man. They weren't looking for a white man. They were looking for a victim.
You can feel how he must have felt when he saw these guys coming down and then running for his life.
Imagine the sheer terror that he was probably feeling.
This guy was lured to his death.
We had a rogue device on this wireless network. So the idea was, all right, well, where are they?
Kind of just feel your whole body collapse in that moment. It takes your breath away.
July 2006. Brooklyn, New York. 28-year-old Michael Sandy is on top of the world. He's just landed a job as a designer for IKEA and is finally pursuing his dreams in the big city.
This is my new apartment. This is Mike's first apartment in New York City.
And his best friend Patrick is by his side.
Mike was really excited about his first Brooklyn apartment. I mean, he was all joy. He had a laugh that could, like, carry a room.
I think it's cool.
Well, it's a wrap. We finished the bed. Made much more space out of this tiny little room. It's wonderful.
I'm glad my hair has changed.
It's rocking.
Oh my gosh. I mean, what did we look like there, right? We were just absolute best friends. Comfortable, really comfortable with each other. He was that friend that would like do anything for you. Loyal, sensitive, compassionate. And those people don't come around very often.
Life hasn't always been easy for Michael, growing up as a young gay black man in conservative Bellport, New York.
His struggle with being gay in Long Island was definitely a thing. Some parts of it was because he wasn't necessarily like out to his parents, but I think that they all had this beautiful kind of unspoken understanding.
I've known Michael Sandy since we were kids. And
Michael spoke very closely with his friends about who he wanted to make connections with, and being in a small town, a conservative town, and a conservative family, these things were kind of hard to explore.
he wanted to work in Brooklyn, live in Brooklyn, breathe Brooklyn. So I think what was very attractive to him was really that social element and to really find a connection, to find love.
I feel like he had to make that move to survive and to express who he was and to be who he was meant to be.
Michael is now living his dream in hip Williamsburg, Brooklyn, an artsy neighborhood just a quick subway ride from Manhattan.
Michael is very agile and he made everything he did look very easy. Okay. Yeah, that was great. But he was a very natural dancer. So that was Michael dancing in a parking garage. Actually, I was filming this. We were 1 and 2 and 3 and punch and, turn and spin. So we had it all choreographed.
It's tough to kind of think about the last time you see someone. But it was a good last in-person memory.
As much as he was so gregarious and outgoing, personally, he was very shy. He had never dated anyone. In 11 years of me knowing him, never had a boyfriend.
He was on the hunt to find love.
In the early fall of 2006, just a few months after moving to Brooklyn, Michael goes out with Patrick and a small group of friends. Another friend captures a lighthearted moment on video.
I've been single for like 5 years. I lived in Long Island forever. No one ever wanted to take me to dinner. No one wanted to ever go out. All of a sudden, I'm in Brooklyn. I moved, and everyone's like, "Oh, what are you doing? Do you want to hang out? I thought you want to hang out." It's like, no, I can't hang out. I'm in Brooklyn. What happened 5 years ago? Right? It's insane. I moved here to find a husband. Let me stop.
The last time I hung out with Michael was very close to the time that he had died. So.
On the evening of October 8th, 2006, numerous calls come into 911 stating that someone's been struck by a vehicle on the Bell Parkway.
It's 10 p.m., and the scene is a dark section of the highway near Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, in an area known as Plum Beach.
That car never stopped. It was a hit and run. Very serious car accident. From injuries, he's unconscious.
The victim, a young black male gravely injured but still clinging to life, is rushed to Brookdale Hospital.
We have a victim. We don't know who he is. We don't know necessarily how he got there. Now we have to figure out why this occurred.
Investigators question witnesses at the scene.
This incident occurs at night when it's dark and everyone's vision is limited. No one really has a good description of the vehicle and or the license plate.
Police search the area and soon make a crucial discovery.
They come across a vehicle that's parked in a parking lot across the highway. The car was still running.
Police recover a photo ID from the vehicle. It's an unmistakable match with the man gravely injured on the parkway.
And through the documentation that they find, they come to find out that this vehicle is owned by a young man by the name of Michael Sandy.
Later that night, some eyewitnesses reveal a disturbing detail.
So some of the accounts that the officers are getting are stating that this young black male is being chased by a number of white males from the parking lot along the Bell Parkway and then being struck by a vehicle as he's being chased. So based on witness accounts, these young men now start to pull him off the highway.
His body got dragged back to the side of the road. They rifled through his pockets before running off. Witnesses saw that.
Given the races that people are specifically noting, we're wondering, is this something racially motivated? You know, this may have been a targeted attack.
A new detail about Michael's final moments comes to light.
The computer logged into America Online, and a conversation was visible on the screen.
The more police learn, the more personal and tragic the case becomes.
It all is a thing to me that stems from his willingness and wanting connection.
He left pointers, he left the breadcrumbs. And like that, I'll see you in 20 minutes, was his final moments as he walked out the door.
Eyewitnesses tell police they saw Michael Sandy being chased by several unidentified white men alongside a New York City highway before he was struck by a hit-and-run driver. Hours later, in the early morning, Michael lies in a coma at Brookdale Hospital in Brooklyn.
He's unconscious, so he can't speak to us to tell us how this all went down.
Meanwhile, word of the shocking incident is slowly spreading among Michael's loved ones.
I got a phone call, and I don't believe anyone knew the full details. I didn't really receive any information other than the fact that he was in the hospital on life support.
One of my good friends called and he said Michael was in a pretty severe accident. Like, I just felt my whole body fall to the ground hearing that. Then you started seeing it on the news.
I was working as a reporter for the New York Post when this happened. We were told that he was still alive, he was in critical condition, and he was unable to communicate to police exactly what happened.
We're talking to the family, kind of getting a clearer picture as to who Michael is. Yeah, they find out that Michael is 28, soon to be 29-year-old male, and he was an interior designer and was just a super nice guy. Probably had zero enemies. And we wanted to try to figure out why he may have suddenly find himself in a conflict with other people.
When I was at the hospital, his parents were just desperately trying to find any resource and help that they could.
It wasn't until I spoke with Mr. and Mrs. Sandy to really know the severity of the impact. They were holding up. They had wonderful support with their family, but it was hard to see them hurting the way that they were.
We were able to see him, and he looked rough. I mean, his head was completely swollen. And, you know, being on life support, there was very little kind of hope in the outcome. And I was just shocked. Yeah, you just kind of go through this point of disbelief.
All the machines beeping and blaring and all the hustle and bustle in the hospital to begin with, it was hard to fully absorb what was happening. But it was tough to see him in that position. feels like a dream happening. Very bad dream.
Detectives have little to explain the attack on Michael, other than the vague possibility it was racially motivated. So they head to Michael's apartment in Williamsburg, hoping his roommates can shed some light on his plans that evening.
So the investigators are now looking to interview his roommates. Want to find out if he has any problems. Did he have a beef with somebody? Was he looking to settle a score? You know, we need to figure out why he may have gone from Williamsburg to Chief's Head Bay, and to see maybe is there any conflict that was occurring that evening.
His roommates don't recall anything out of the ordinary that evening, but they mention that they saw Michael chatting on the internet earlier in the night. They chalk it up to some innocent online dating.
We are hearing from Michael Sandy's roommates that he is single, and like many people were doing when this whole online dating thing was starting to really take hold, he was going out and talking to people online and going out to meet them.
The internet really emerged when we were young adults. And this is one way where we could connect to people of our age and have that social interaction, even if it was a digital form of connection.
So back in 2006, the online dating scene was still pretty new and fairly unregulated. So you were talking to people online and not really knowing who was on the other end.
Now investigators begin to question if race had anything to do with the crime, or whether Michael's innocent search for love online may have led him down a dangerous path.
Every new thing has its benefits and its drawbacks. And we had seen, certainly by 2006, that the online environment was one that was being used pretty heavily by gay men in particular. And one of the drawbacks of the internet and online dating is that people will use them as avenues to target others.
So now we potentially want to look at Michael Sandy's computer to see if that is going to give us any investigative evidence to corroborate that.
Investigators find Michael's laptop in his bedroom.
Now we start to shift their attention to, did Michael Sandy maybe talk to somebody online and went to go meet them, and maybe that scenario went wrong?
To explore the possibility that a crime may have originated on the internet, investigators reach out to computer specialist Denise Dragos.
The New York City Police Department had one of the very first computer crime units in the country. It was called CITU back in those days, Computer Investigation and Technology Unit. Eventually, it became the Computer Crime Squad. The detective squad, they needed assistance to actually handle the laptop as evidence and preserve what was visible on the screen and whatever else may be on that computer. So I got my kit together, which we would bring out to digital crime scenes. Hard drives, USB drives, other tools potentially that may come in handy, and we responded. The computer was logged into America Online, and a conversation was visible on the screen.
City police believe a computer chat may have lured Michael Sandy into an attack. As Michael lays gravely injured in the hospital, NYPD computer specialist Denise Dragos discovers that Michael's computer is still logged into a chat room on America Online.
The chat conversation happened the evening of the 8th. Before the incident, basically it's two users, Fisheye Fox, and a second account, which went by the screen name Drum and Bass 007, which is Michael's account. They're having a conversation. They're talking about potentially smoking marijuana together. And, they say how old each of them are, what they look like.
So in the initial conversation that Michael Sandy's having with this Fisheye Fox, they agree to meet up. They talk about meeting up in Plum Beach, Brooklyn, which is where he is struck by a vehicle.
They make plans to meet there at 8 o'clock, but it's clear that things didn't go as planned.
So searching through Michael's AOL chat history, when they meet up, Fish-Eyed Fox is not alone. There are other people around, which makes Michael Sandy feel uneasy. So he gets spooked and he leaves.
By 8:45, Michael returns to the chat from his apartment in Williamsburg.
He goes back to his computer, and Fish-Eyed Fox is saying, hey, what happened to you, and why'd you leave? And Michael Sandy says, well, I thought we were meeting one-on-one, and there were other people around, so it just felt weird, so I left. And now Fish-Eyed Fox is trying to convince him, oh, yeah, I don't know who those guys were, or, we can just meet one-on-one, it'll just be the two of us. So come on back out, and we'll meet up again.
By 10 o'clock, Michael is found by the side of the parkway just yards from the Plum Beach parking lot.
It all is a thing to me that stems from his willingness and wanting connection. Like, so much went out of his brain for that possibility. And the real hard part is that he just didn't listen to his instinct that day. And he went back.
Looking back, I got the impression that he might have had an idea of what he was doing was potentially risky. I don't think it was an accident that he left his computer on with the chat window open. He left pointers, he left the breadcrumbs. And like that, I'll see you in 20 minutes was his final moments as he walked out the door.
Police now believe this online chat between Michael and Fish-Eye Fox is a key piece of evidence, and they're hoping it may lead them to a suspect.
We started doing live system analysis at the time, just to preserve the information that was there. So even without touching it, did little old school pictures, traditional pictures of it, just to make sure that even if it crashed, at least we had that. We were running special software on the machines, which copied out all of the system memory to an external drive. So that in that case, we were able to get a lot of information and preserve it forensically in real time.
For investigators, it's now imperative that they track down the man Michael was chatting with, who goes by the screen name Fish-Eye Fox. But due to privacy laws, that will require a court order.
You have to remember, back in 2006, the internet was a very different place. Some of these social media companies were not necessarily forthcoming with information about their clients.
We started doing the process to subpoena America Online to see who owns this Fish-Eye Fox account, if we could identify that person.
On October 9th, a day after Michael Sandy was struck on the Belt Parkway, the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office issues a subpoena to America Online to disclose the name of the individual who goes by the chat handle Fish-Eye Fox.
So in the investigation, we come to find out that Fish-Eyed Fox is a screen name that is owned by someone by the name of John Fox, who has an IP address that comes back to Brooklyn. And thus, the investigators now go to that address in Brooklyn where the ping of this IP address is coming back to.
The address on Brigham Street is just a few blocks from Plum Beach in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, where Michael was struck.
It was a row houses on this block on Brigham Street. We pretty much set up a surveillance operation with numerous detectives in different cars. And as all the teams are sitting there, somebody shows up at that house and walks up to the front gate. All of the police cars, come screeching up, and the detectives jump out and approach the individual. We identified ourselves as being detectives, NYPD. And he says, "What's going on, guys?"
LIPD detectives have tracked the source of a computer chat room message they believe was used to lure Michael Sandy to a vicious attack. Based on the IP address linked to the message, they descend on a house in Brooklyn.
The gentleman lived at that address. He said, I just got off work. Can I help you guys? So we asked him his name.
The chat room message was from a user called Fisheye Fox, who police have identified as John Fox. But that is not the man's name. And there's no one named John Fox who lives at his address.
So that was a little bit of a pucker moment. Like, oh crap. We asked, do you have internet service? He goes, yeah, as a matter of fact, I just got a new router. So we're like, all right, can we come inside and talk to you about a situation? He says, yeah, come on inside. As soon as we walk into the kitchen, right there on the kitchen table, we can see a brand new wireless router.
So new that no security has been set up on it yet. Detective Dragos realizes that means anyone could have tapped into this internet service. And a quick check reveals her theory to be correct.
It appeared that now we had a rogue device on this wireless network. The homeowner just had a new router and it wasn't secured and was logged into surreptitiously by this Fisheye Fox user.
Detective Dragos knows that if the rogue device is logged into this router, it must be close by, within range of the Wi-Fi signal.
All right, well, where are they? They have to be within a stone's throw. So let's try and figure out where they are right now. So I'm like, I can try to talk to them and stir the pot and see what happens. So I have an undercover account and I'm like, hey, what's up? It was just a shot in the dark to see, if I could figure out where the heck this computer was. I get a response from Fisheye Fox. So now I'm talking to Fisheye Fox myself. So I'm like, hey, what's going on? How you been? When are we getting together? And he's, I'm back at school. So we're confounded right now.
Detective Dragos reaches out to her contact at America Online, who is able to determine that John Fox, aka Fisheye Fox, is now chatting from a different location entirely.
And we're like, well, what's this other location? And they said it goes back to SUNY Maritime, which is State University of New York Maritime College, which was a college, in the Bronx.
A check with the campus security office reveals there is a sophomore enrolled at SUNY Maritime, named John Fox.
It was after midnight, I'm sure, at that point. And basically, we all responded in a caravan from that location. Everybody drove out to the Bronx to go and talk to John Fox.
The investigators coordinate with SUNY campus police to locate John Fox's dorm room.
It's 1 a.m. in the morning, and now you're going to talk to someone whose part in this whole thing is still unclear. We do know that John Fox is connected to the screen name that Michael Sandy was talking to. So everyone's antennas are up.
When the 19-year-old student comes to the door, he appears surprised, but his demeanor is calm.
So the investigators are now talking to John Fox at his dorm, and they're asking him, what was your weekend like? And he proceeds to tell them, well, I was just hanging out with some friends, and we were just drinking some beers, just chilling out for the weekend, just a few friends having a good time. During this interview, John Fox starts to get nervous, and his answers start to contradict themselves. This is going from an interview turning into an interrogation.
John Fox agrees to accompany the detectives to the 61st Precinct in Brooklyn.
John Fox is saying in his statement that he and Anthony Fortunato and Gary Timmons and the Russian kid, Alex, are hanging out by a local deli. They decide to go back to the house where John Fox logs into the computer. And he admits that Fish-Eyed Fox is his screen name, but that his friends must have been using his screen name to have a conversation, because he knew nothing about this conversation. But then he starts to turn around and say, well, we were just looking to have a little fun. What does that mean? What does it mean that we're looking to have a little fun? And he starts to basically incriminate himself. And he claims Anthony Fortunato is the one who sort of hatched this scheme to go into a gay chat room, talk with someone who's looking to meet up with another man, and then meet up with that person to rob them under the assumption that the gay man won't go to the police.
The reality that some folks actually feel a certain amount of shame, and so they would be less likely to report. They would be less likely to make a complaint.
It was a very powerful set of facts. There was something particularly chilling about how this man was lured out to his death, basically.
Could have been anyone. They weren't looking for a black man, they weren't looking for a white man, they were looking for a victim. And unfortunately, they chose Michael Sandy.
John Fox admits to NYPD detectives that he, Anthony Fortunato, and a group of their friends used the screen name Fish-Eye Fox in a chat room to set up a meeting with Michael Sandy under the guise of a date, with the intention of robbing him.
So they met on the street. John Fox and him had a brief conversation, and Fortunato and then a couple of their other friends actually were in the area. So Michael got spooked. His spidey sense was tingling. He left. All was good.
Detectives believe that while Michael returned home, John Fox and his friends didn't want to give up.
They start drinking beers again, and they say, oh, maybe we can find somebody else. In the interim, Michael reaches back out. I said, hey, I just want to hang out with you. I don't want to do a group thing, so let's just me and you hang out. So John was like, all right, cool, we'll do that. So he came back.
They all get to Plum Beach, and they approach a blue Mazda, which is Michael Sandy's car. Alex starts to assault Michael Sandy. Michael Sandy breaks away from the assault, and they start to chase him.
Where was he going to go? If they were going to prevent him from getting into his car, he's going onto the highway.
Imagine the sheer terror that he was probably feeling when he's chased onto a busy highway, running for his life and running into a speeding vehicle. Those last seconds of his life were seconds that he didn't deserve.
That car takes off, never stops. And then the men, they drag him to the side of the road. One of them goes into his pockets, empties everything, and they take off.
John Fox, he says they all fled the scene, and then they all went back to the house, and they were all shaken up by this whole scenario.
It's almost like classic stupid kids, but there was a coldness about it as well.
Police begin to investigate the friends John Fox says took part in the scheme. And when they learn the home address of Anthony Fortunato, the pieces of the puzzle start to come together. Fortunato's house is next door to the Brooklyn home the detectives visited the night before, where a rogue computer was logged into the Wi-Fi.
So they go to Anthony Fortunato's house to talk to him, and he claims, yeah, I'll come talk to you. I'm just gonna get a lawyer and I'll come down to the station to talk to you guys.
But Fortunato never shows up at the precinct as promised.
Then suddenly we get a call from his mother stating that, well, Anthony can't come talk to you because he's in the hospital. He tried to kill himself. However, John Fox has implicated 2 other people, Gary Timmons and this other kid known as the Russian kid, Alex. So the investigators looking through MySpace with the information given to them by John Fox find out Russian kid's true identity is now revealed by someone by the name of Ilya Shurov. So now investigators can go talk to them.
Fox, Timmons, and Shirov all confess to their roles in the attack, pointing to Fortunato as the mastermind of the plan. Meanwhile, at Brookdale Hospital, Michael Sandy's family is facing a terrible choice.
So Michael Sandy's in the hospital unconscious. He's dying. He's not going to recover. The doctors know this. Doctors make the family aware of this. And he will never be the person that he was.
On October 12th, Michael Sandy spends his 29th birthday with his family holding vigil in his ICU room. They know they are spending their final moments with him.
They wanted to wait so that he didn't die on his birthday.
So a day after his 29th birthday, his family made that awful, awful decision.
I received a call from Mrs. Sandy and said, we took
Malice for anything of joy and life and love.
Investigators now have statements from 3 of their suspects, but they still can't speak with Anthony Fortunato, the alleged mastermind of the scheme, who remains hospitalized after his suicide attempt. While they wait for his condition to improve, they execute a search warrant at his home.
We go back out to the location, and when law enforcement gets there, they said, all right, you're looking for computers, here's our computer. This is the only computer we have. But we're able to actually look at the computer and immediately say, no, that's not the computer we're looking for, because it is mapped to the manufacturer. And in this case, we knew we were looking for a Dell computer. The computer that they happened to pull out of a hat and say was the only computer in the house was not a Dell. So we were like, no, try again. And they didn't have any other computers that they were willing to voluntarily turn over. So a search of the residence commenced as authorized by the search warrant. Hidden in the basement was a Dell laptop. That was the computer that was connected to the IP address that was connected to Fisheye Fox during the crime. So we knew we found what we were looking for. It basically was the smoking gun.
By the time Fortunato is released from the hospital, Kings County prosecutors are prepared to act. They now have everything they need to file charges of attempted robbery and manslaughter, but they're also considering a unique enhancement to the charges that's rarely been tried before.
This was a real social problem that people were being targeted as victims of a crime because they belonged to certain groups. And in this case, they were looking to select a gay person, and that's what they did. That is the element that establishes the hate crime.
Four men are facing charges in the attack that killed Michael Sandy. And prosecutors are prepared to also try them on a rare and untested set of charges.
This was one of the first cases I can recall clearly where the hate crimes enhancement was actually used in New York State for an anti-gay murder. And I think it was important for the community for this to be called what it was. It had a lot of meaning for people.
On October 25th, 2006, John Fox, Ilya Shurov, and Anthony Fortunato are indicted on charges of second-degree murder, attempted robbery, and manslaughter as a hate crime. That same day, Gary Timmons, who was a minor at the time of the crime, pleads guilty to attempted robbery in the second degree.
You want to make sure that when a case is tried as a hate crime, it has to specifically plug into the statutes of the hate crimes law. And the sentence that is usually handed down is a much heavier sentence.
But as the date of trial approaches in October 2007, nearly a year to the day from the attack on Michael at Plum Beach, Anthony Fortunato's attorney mounts a stunning defense to the hate crime charges.
Fortunato tried to pull a rabbit out of the hat and said it can't be a hate crime because he came out of the closet himself. He identified himself as being a gay man and said that because he's gay, it can't be a hate crime because you can't hate gay people if you're gay also.
It was an extremely flimsy defense legally because hate is not an aspect of the crime itself. That's not something that the prosecution has to establish in order to establish somebody's guilt of a hate crime. He could have mixed motives, but it doesn't get him off the hook. From the get-go, the whole plan was based on targeting a gay person.
John Fox and Anthony Fortunato are acquitted of murder, but convicted of manslaughter and attempted robbery as hate crimes, receiving sentences of 7 to 21 years. A month later, Ilya Shurov pleads guilty to the same charges and receives a sentence of 17.5 years. Gary Timmons, who testifies as a prosecution witness, receives a 4-year sentence.
When they were found guilty, it was a natural release to have some vindication, but I don't know about the justice part.
I absolutely cannot say as to whether or not justice was served in this case. Maybe it's for Michael's parents to answer that question, for Michael's soul or spirit to answer that question, even in an odd way for his perpetrators to answer that question. Because I would have a hard time feeling that justice were served if they did not come to understand the gravity and tragedy of what they did.
This case sort of impacted me on a personal level. Back in 2006, I was a single gay man on the internet, talking to people and meeting up with people. For all practical purposes, I could have been Michael Sandy.
Michael Sandy's closest friends are left with nothing now, except their memories, and a few artifacts of his last days, like this video from the fall of 2006, when he enjoyed a final evening out in Brooklyn with his friends.
Can I put my glasses on?
I've been single for like 5 years. I lived on Long Island forever. No one ever wanted to take me to dinner. No one to ever go out. You know, I moved here to find a husband. Stop.
That is too much. You heard his laugh.
You know, I moved here to find a husband.
He was a wonderful human being from head to toe.
Wonderful. It's rocking.
He exudes this wonderful light that shines and magical laughter and smiles. And he loved life to the fullest.
She was really serious about her job, and she loved her dog. She took Boogie everywhere with her.
Are we going to PetSmart? You're gonna go play?
sent me a text and she was like, "Hey S, if anything happens," and I was like, "Something's wrong."
Everyone was watching this case. It's a missing woman, but also it's a missing veteran.
She knew she was being videotaped, and she's leaving breadcrumbs.
It looked like maybe she was carjacked, maybe somebody pulled her out of her vehicle, maybe she was kidnapped.
A murder case is tough as it is, but a no-body murder case kind of is in a different league. You're looking at this person's actual final moments. It just strikes at your heart.
San Diego, California, September 2017. 37-year-old Julia Jacobson is a woman on the move.
Julia was very hardworking, very driven, determined, focused. She had goals, and there was not going to be anybody that was going to get in the way of those goals.
When Julia was in her early 20s, she joined the Army after serving in the ROTC in college, and she quickly rose to the rank of captain.
Julia was one of my classmates and battle buddies in ROTC. A lot of times in the military, you'll find people that are very type A, but almost to a toxic fault. And Julia was never that. She was very centered, very grounded. She wasn't going to push you down.
I met Julia when we were serving with the 39th Finance Battalion in Germany. We were the same age, but of course she was an officer, I was enlisted. That just goes to show you how dedicated and driven she is. One thing about Julia that I really admire is she will not let you fail. She will always make sure that you succeed.
And those qualities prove invaluable for Julia, who served 2 tours of duty as a finance officer in Iraq.
Our mission in Iraq was to fund the outlying bases, and we would transfer large sums at a time by air. Julia put together a great team, and we all know our duties. Everything was very coordinated. Dangerous, yes, but we knew what we were getting into.
In Iraq, every place that you went was dangerous. And Julia, transporting large sums of money, had to be brave and had to be focused on the job at hand. Her with her wads of money. This is the Julia that I know and loved. Just soldier. I'm sure she is rolling before this picture is taken. That smile.
After her discharge from the Army in 2009, at the age of 29, Julia transitioned seamlessly from military to corporate work, climbing the ranks of the accounting division at the 7-Eleven Corporation.
I met Julia through work, and we became really best friends. Right away, she just wanted to help me become successful with the company. She was really serious about her job, and she loved her dog.
Julia's devotion to her career leaves her little time for romance. But in 2015, she meets Dalen Ware.
I believe she met him on a contracted job on site of one of the 7-Eleven locations that she was working, overseeing. Julia was very personal and private, and she hadn't had a lot of partners either. He told her she was beautiful, so there was automatically a connection there. Dalen was her real intimate partner.
After a year and a half, Julia and Dalen elope to Las Vegas.
She was like, we got married in the drive-thru on the Strip. And then she just thought it was so funny. I was like, you serious?
Julia puts her heart and soul into the marriage. But after several months, her busy work life leads to tension in the relationship.
She said, well, every time I travel, he'll wait till I leave and then call and be like, you're always leaving me. You didn't tell me when we got married that you wouldn't be available. You didn't tell me that I'd be in this house by myself. You're not giving me the attention that I need.
I got very, very tense, and you could just read the people's faces, and you're just like, this is not a good situation.
I just didn't like him, didn't like the vibe.
The conflict grows, and soon Julia feels she has no choice but to file for divorce.
She called me and she was like, I'm done, Chanel. Like, I cannot do this, I'm done. That was the first time I saw her cry, and it was a hurtful cry. And I was like, Julia, I don't think this guy is the right one for you.
The failure of her marriage is a disappointment. But within a year of her divorce, by the summer of 2017, Julia is ready to move on with her life.
She texted me one day and she's like, I met somebody, and she had met this guy named John. He was military, coming from a divorce from the East Coast, and he's in San Diego. She was like, he's nice, he's cool. I liked it. I liked the happiness, I liked the tone, the laughter.
On September 2nd, 2017, Julia sets out early from her home in San Diego for a road trip into the desert.
It was Labor Day weekend, and Julia was gonna just go have a fun weekend, enjoy having some time off.
I texted her on Friday and I was like, hey, what's going on? She texts me and goes, I'm with a friend. So that's all she sent, and I was like, oh, she got an attitude. I'm thinking she was with John. And she sent me a text and she was like, on my way to Big Bear. And I was like, was Boogie with her? And she was like, yes. Now, every time Julia has had a road trip, we will talk on the phone the whole time. 2-3 hours, no matter how long it was, her and I be on the phone the whole time. So that's all she sent, and I was like, something's wrong.
A short time later, Chanel receives a troubling set of texts from Julia.
Hey, S, if anything happens, she didn't say anything. So I just sent the question mark. And she goes, call my sister. And I was like, hey, what's going on? She didn't answer. And that was the last time we texted each other.
Later that weekend, when Julia's family doesn't hear from her, they also start to worry.
Julia had a very close relationship with her family, and she connected with them every day. When she didn't call on her daily call and then connect with her sister as well, they thought something was strange. That's when they started posting on social media to try to locate her, and then ultimately, a day or two after the holiday weekend, they called the San Diego Police Department to make a missing persons report.
On September 6th, the San Diego Police Department opens an investigation.
Julia had been missing a day and a half. My heart sank because that's not her. And you dread it because I didn't want to be negative about that and think, oh, something's happened to her. But I knew that something very tragic had happened.
Security camera footage helps narrow the search for Julia.
Was this going to turn out the way that everyone wanted, or was this going to take a darker turn?
And investigators uncover critical clues.
They came in separate cars and checked into the hotel.
I believe there was some kind of cadaver odor present inside of that vehicle.
At this point, all the arrows were pointing at him.
September 6th, 2017. It's the first day of the investigation into Julia Jacobson's disappearance.
Julia's friends rallied to support her almost immediately. And the fact of the matter is, they pushed this to such an extent that it was so unusual for somebody to be missing for 1 day or 2 days, and to have the police react this quickly to start the investigation. And it was unique from my experience in 20 years of doing this stuff.
Investigators start the subpoena process for Julia's emails and online accounts. Meanwhile, San Diego police conduct a search of her apartment, where they find no signs of forced entry or a struggle. Next, detectives want to speak with those closest to Julia, starting with her new boyfriend, John, to see if he had been traveling with her that weekend.
On our radar very immediately was the relationship that Julia had just developed with a new person.
But John tells investigators he was not on the Labor Day weekend trip with Julia, and he hasn't seen her since.
Our first suspect is usually the closest person to the victim, especially when it's an intimate relationship. But we were able to check other things, including cell phone information, text messages, and so forth. So we were able to pretty quickly eliminate him as a suspect, or at least put him down a few tiers.
Julia's weekend travel companion is still a mystery, so investigators expand the circle of people they talk to, including Julia's ex-husband, Dalen Ware.
During the course of that day, Dalen Ware, he had been contacted by detectives just to see if he had known anything about where Julia was.
Dalen Ware told authorities that he hadn't seen Julia in about a year, and they had an amicable divorce. Everything was copacetic. It was fine. He lives in Arizona, so that's a pretty great alibi for him. So police weren't suspicious of him.
Desperate to learn what's happened to Julia, her friends and family launch their own search.
Julia doesn't disappear like that. Her sisters were even asking me, you think that she just wants to get away? But I was like, no, she's never gonna just go somewhere and disappear and put everybody through that.
At that point, we really need to get rocking and rolling to get whatever evidence that we can get.
The San Diego Police Department organizes a team of digital investigators led by Peter Villiver to try to pinpoint Julia's whereabouts.
We have a 37-year-old military vet gone missing from San Diego, and our task was to locate her. I specialize in cell phone tracking. That's what I was enlisted for. So the investigators, parallel to my review of the call detail records, also were able to acquire financial transactions. It's not immediate, but when we parallel the two together, it gives us a better picture of her general whereabouts.
Investigators issue an alert to be on the lookout for Julia's car.
Her vehicle had the service that allows us to locate it, but it's very limited because it's not an active OnStar service, but we were able to identify where she stopped at a 7-Eleven in the Tierra Santa neighborhood of San Diego.
Police visit the 7-Eleven store and ask to review its surveillance footage. They spot Julia in the video on the morning of September 2nd, just a few hours before her friends and family last hear from her.
When I look at that footage of Julia in the 7-Eleven, she's obviously trying to select some items and then doesn't select the items and just leaves the store without purchasing anything. We don't know why she was doing that.
Yep. That's Julia. Shorts and flip-flops. She got a purse with her. To me, she does not look like she's concerned about anything. She's just looking like she's going on a small road trip.
Then, on September 7th, 5 days after Julia was last seen, police make a troubling discovery close to Julia's home in San Diego.
Julia's car is actually found parked a couple blocks from her house. Strangely, the keys were in the ignition, the windows were down, and Julia's purse was left in the car.
Julia always locked her doors, never left her windows rolled down. So I was like, it's not good.
So it looked like maybe she was carjacked, maybe somebody pulled her out of her vehicle, maybe she was kidnapped. That was a major red flag for authorities.
"5 days after Julia Jacobson was last seen, authorities discover her car abandoned on a street near her home in San Diego.
Julia's car was recovered down in San Diego with the windows down and the keys in the ignition, but strangely, nobody apparently disturbed it.
Police impound the vehicle, a white SUV that Julia is believed to have been driving on her Labor Day weekend road trip. News of the discovery heightens interest in Julia's case across the region.
There's a push on social media to try to raise awareness. And I remember the weight of it. And it was an important story in our newsroom and for other newsrooms throughout a huge part of Southern California. And there's still a feeling of hopefulness. She became a recognizable face around the region. Those missing person signs were everywhere.
By the morning of September 8th, the mystery of Julia Jacobson's disappearance is growing deeper with each passing hour.
You've got police coming together from all of Southern California. Was this going to turn out the way that everyone wanted, or was this going to take a darker turn?
Our suspicions are pretty clear here what's going on. I was convinced Julia was dead, and I think the police were too.
In their search for more definitive answers, investigators are trying to track Julia's movements using her electronic data. It's a slow process. The information is trickling in gradually, in chronological order, a single day at a time.
With Julia Jacobson's case, we were about 72 hours behind every time we moved. So we would find something that occurred 72 hours prior as we progressed the investigation.
Julia's cell phone data reveals that she took an odd path before she vanished. And it's a long way from where she told Chanel she was headed. According to credit card records, 12 hours after she was at a 7-Eleven in San Diego, she stopped in another 7-Eleven store. This one 100 miles north in Ontario, California.
If you're not in California and you don't understand the geography here, Ontario is nowhere near Big Bear. So it's incredibly unusual that somebody who says they're en route to Big Bear is suddenly in Ontario. It's like a 90-minute drive at least. It makes no sense.
Once again, detectives are able to identify Julia in the surveillance footage. And again, Julia's behavior in the store raises questions for the investigators.
We see her on the 2 videos, and she goes in, she looks around, she touches a few items. She knows, having worked at that corporation, that you go into that store, you're on a video camera. This is a highly intelligent, sophisticated woman. To me, as an investigator, I'm looking at that and saying, she knew she was being videotaped, and she's leaving breadcrumbs for any investigator if something ever happens to her. And it just makes you wonder why she was doing it.
And there's no explanation for why Julia strayed so far from her stated destination. No hint of her current whereabouts, and no way to even know if she is alive or dead. So police decide to take a new approach to the case.
Somebody in the Detective Bureau had the idea of having a cadaver dog involved. This dog is trained to smell cadavers. We had the San Bernardino Sheriff cadaver dog travel down to San Diego to the San Diego Police Department's evidence holding facility, which was essentially a parking lot.
It's the parking lot where Julia's abandoned vehicle is being held for evidence.
They had impounded her vehicle, and I brought my cadaver dog down to see if there was any cadaver odor associated with this vehicle. The vehicle was in a secure police lockup, so what I did was release the dog inside the locked storage facility where I think there was 5 cars total, and I had no idea whose vehicle was the victim's vehicle. K9 Ellie immediately circled all the vehicles and then really started detailing a smaller white SUV. I could see that she only had interest in that one vehicle and one vehicle only.
It's Julia's white Chevrolet Equinox.
She wouldn't leave it alone, and she refused to leave that area. I was able to open the rear tailgate. Ellie hopped right in and was almost going crazy, sniffing the ceiling upholstery and the upholstery of the seats in the rear cargo area. There was nothing we could see, but I interpreted Ellie's behavior as a positive for some kind of cadaver odor on the inside of this vehicle.
Investigators can now only assume the worst.
Our suspicions were no longer suspicions. We knew. We knew that Julia was dead.
A week after Julia Jacobson was reported missing, a cadaver dog finds indications that a dead body has been in her car.
She was only looking for cadaver. That is the only detection odor that she's imprinted on. Now, there was nothing visible that we could see, but she had definitely detected something there.
The missing person case is now likely a homicide, but the investigation hasn't turned up any suspects. As her best friend Chanel tries to make sense of what might have happened, she can't stop rereading the final text messages she received from Julia.
If anything happens to me, call my sister. So that plays in my head over and over again. Something wasn't right. Julia's very detailed, so she never would send me a short text like that.
Chanel can't help but wonder about the mysterious friend with whom Julia was traveling.
And I started realizing if she had Boogie with her, the only person that would be around was Dalen.
Julia's ex-husband, Dalen Ware, has already been interviewed by police, who believe he was hundreds of miles away in Arizona that weekend. But Chanel isn't buying it.
Boogie only liked certain people. She loved Julia, she loved Dalen, and she loved my dog and me. So whenever Julia would go traveling, only people that can watch Boogie would be me or Dalen. I think she never stopped really talking to him. So I finally was like, I bet you she met up with Dalen.
Chanel reaches out to the San Diego police with her revelation, but they tell her there's nothing in the investigation pointing to Dalen Ware.
They kept on saying that they're interviewing other people. I was like, please look into it.
When the subpoena for Julia's computer records finally comes through, investigators start digging through her emails in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, and they suddenly begin to share Chanel's suspicions. They discover dozens of hostile and threatening messages, sometimes as many as 15 a day, sent to Julia from Dalen Ware.
So here's one email from Dalen Ware to Julia. He wrote, "It could have been so easy. Just apologize and tell the truth. But you want to be evil and run and hide and hurt me worse. Wrong move, mother. Last message. You're going to regret this, you dumb B-word. You got off easy before, but not this time, with a couple of exclamation marks. It's pretty aggressive. It's pretty horrifying.
Julia's friend Chanel is not surprised. Julia has told her that her ex isn't happy that she's got a new boyfriend.
He was livid about this guy, John. Oh, he was livid. You know, he hated that she was with him and that she was happy.
But why would Julia have met up again with Dalen and keep it a secret from her friends?
I think that everyone, men, women, everyone, we have told little white lies or withheld some details from people in our lives to either protect ourselves or protect them from the truth. I think it's pretty common to withhold a few details because you know that you're going to get the wrath of your girlfriend or your mom or your sister who doesn't think you should still be hanging out with so-and-so.
With a possible motive, anger at Julia's new relationship, investigators begin taking another look at Dalen. As they do, a new credit card transaction posts to Julia's account, prompting a breakthrough discovery.
So through the records that I reviewed on the evening of the 2nd, we were able to locate where she stayed at in the general vicinity. And then at that point, the investigators were able to specifically identify the hotel that she was staying at. It was a hotel off of Interstate 10 in Ontario, which was the DoubleTree Hotel.
Investigators immediately contact the DoubleTree Hotel to review their guest registry. It confirms that Julia booked a room for 2 nights, starting on September 2nd. Detectives also acquire the hotel's security footage.
When they go back and they look at video footage from the hotel in Ontario, they see Dalen Ware with Julia Jacobson.
They came in separate cars and checked into the hotel.
We saw Julia walk in at about 9:46 p.m. with the suspect and with Boogie, and she was never seen leaving the property moving forward.
That's the last picture we have of Julia. You can't help but think, what is going through this young person's mind? It's inescapable as a human being. You never know when your time is going to come, but you're looking at this person's actual final moments, and it just strikes at your heart.
Investigators in California believe Julia Jacobson was murdered during a road trip on Labor Day weekend. And they now have proof that her ex-husband, Dalen Ware, was with her on the day she went missing.
Now, there was enough evidence to then go back to Dalen Ware and start questioning him. And that's when he changed his tune.
He confirmed that he had been with her. He called it the last hurrah. He knew that this was the last time she was moving on to something, and there was something that was going to be breaking or changing in their relationship.
But Dalen firmly denies harming Julia in any way.
He then explained to the police that he left her on September 4th, and they mutually departed from the DoubleTree Hotel, and that they're both moving on in different directions of their lives.
Detectives are skeptical. Dalen is now their prime murder suspect.
At this point, all the arrows were pointing at him. Our suspicions are pretty clear here what's going on here, but do we have enough to file a murder case? Not yet. We had to have more.
Knowing that Dalen was with Julia at the hotel, the investigators begin tracing his moves through cell phone data and financial transactions, as they have been doing with Julia. As the records come in, a disturbing picture emerges of Dalen's activity in the day and a half after they checked in. Beginning shortly before 1 a.m. on the morning of September 3rd.
So those early morning hours of September 3rd, Dalen Ware went to the Walmart store in Corona and purchased a number of items. One of those was a 50-gallon tub, some black sheets, a shovel, and some bleach. But then he went to another Walmart and he purchased another series of items. One was some kind of wrapping cord and kerosene. He's going to 2 different locations in the middle of the night to purchase these items, and we know something is going on here. In law enforcement, we call that a murder kit.
Then Dalen returns to the DoubleTree Hotel in the early morning hours.
About 4 o'clock in the morning, hotel surveillance videos, Dalen Ware getting one of the hotel dollies from the lobby back to the room. And about 15-20 minutes later, the same individual pushing the dolly was seen with what appears to be containers towards the parking lot.
We have surveillance footage of Dalen leaving the DoubleTree, and he loaded a 50-gallon tote on the luggage cart and then put some items to kind of obscure the tote onto the luggage cart, and then he took that and loaded it into Julia's car. At no point do we see Julia.
After loading the items into Julia's car, Dalen is seen returning to the room, where he remains until about 5 p.m. on September 3rd.
So at this point, Dalen Ware again went to another same big box retail facility. This time he went west towards West Covina.
Credit card records show he purchases additional storage bins, as well as kerosene, football receiver gloves, and other items. In the early evening of September 3rd, Dalen returns to the DoubleTree Hotel.
6:43 p.m., there was a swipe card transaction on the key. So he was in the property of DoubleTree in Ontario.
Dalen is captured on video leaving the hotel for the last time in the early morning hours of September 4th. Julia's dog Boogie is with him now, and they drive off in Julia's car. But there's still no sign of Julia. Investigators are able to roughly track the car's movements using the vehicle's OnStar system.
At 6:37 a.m., the OnStar showed a location off of Interstate 10 at Washington Street, which is in Palm Desert area. When the detectives went there, they went to 2 different gas stations to say, hey, can we look at video surveillance on or about this time? And lo and behold, the detectives was able to capture a video surveillance of the suspect and the victim's vehicle in a car wash.
And what we have is surveillance footage of Dalen in the back of Julia's car, taking out those 50-gallon totes and taking the car wash, not to wash the car, but to wash the totes out. He puts the totes back in the car, and then they proceed further west down to San Diego, where the car is abandoned a couple blocks from Julia's house.
The detectives find more images of Dalen on surveillance video. On the evening of September 4th, they see him near where Julia's abandoned car was found.
We have Dalen walking from the general location of the car, ultimately to a Denny's location, where Dalen got into that taxi cab and had the taxi cab drive him all the way back up to Ontario, another 100 miles, and drop him off at a location of a Motel 6, which was directly across the street from the DoubleTree Hotel. So he was caught on the camera at the Motel 6 getting out of the taxi cab, and then apparently walked across the street and retrieved his car, which had remained in the DoubleTree parking lot this whole time. And then we know that he traveled east again back to his home in the Phoenix area.
The case for bringing murder charges against Dalen Ware now appears strong, but there is one key weakness.
A murder case is tough as it is, but a no-body murder case kind of is in a different league. And so you have to be able to paint the picture of the sequence of events and where this all leads. And the loose end we had was we didn't have proof that somebody was deceased or murdered. So we knew we had to have some proof that she was not just missing.
On October 13th, 2017, nearly a month and a half since Julia went missing, San Bernardino County prosecutors make a calculated gamble.
Dalen Ware was arrested in his home in Arizona and brought to San Bernardino County to face murder charges. So we filed it as a first-degree murder case, knowing full well this would be a challenge. We knew we had to find Julia.
Dalen Ware has been arrested for the murder of his ex-wife, Julia Jacobson. It's devastating news for her family and friends who've been desperately searching for her.
My feelings were so hurt. That's all I can remember, is that I knew it. You know, I knew that he had something to do with it. And even though they arrested him, I was trying to convince myself that, you know, maybe she's still alive somewhere.
Prosecutors have a challenging job ahead of them. Without a body, proving that Julia has been killed will not be easy. In late October 2017, authorities from multiple agencies begin a massive search for Julia's remains.
We know that the OnStar device tracked them to an exit off the 10 freeway in Riverside County.
Based on that OnStar data, investigators narrow the search area to a 6-mile radius of rough, arid terrain.
It took a lot of people coming together to try to find her. 120 people out there with these search parties, searching this 6-mile radius, which is huge in the desert.
But after weeks of searching, they still can't find Julia.
We didn't have that information, and the only person that we could get it from was Dalen Ware. I proceeded to start negotiating with the defense attorney for Mr. Ware, and I kind of gave him an ultimatum with some incentives, and ultimately we agreed to enter a plea deal with Dalen Ware for second-degree murder.
On December 1st, 2017, Dalen Ware agrees to help investigators find Julia's body.
He took us out to the location in that Date Palm area in a very remote part of the desert.
Investigators enlist Deputy Sheriff David Moyer and his canine Ellie to help search. The same dog and handler that detected the odor of a dead body in Julia's car.
As soon as I let Ellie out of the car, she took off into the desert at a dead run. And we're running way out into the desert. And sure enough, Canine Ellie went to it like a laser. There was an area in the desert I could see with a tremendous amount of animal disturbance, and the very first thing I could see from a distance was a pink dog harness that had been pulled out of a shallow hole.
We had the remains of a human, and we had the remains of a dog, all buried in this shallow grave.
This person took Julia's life and took her most beloved friend's life. And I think that's especially sickening.
Well, I was at work and I got a text message from Julia's sister. And she was like, hey, can you talk? So I got up right away and I called her and she was like, they found Julia. And I was like, where? Well, they found her in the desert and they found Boogie with her as well. And I screamed and I just fell to the floor. And all I kept thinking was, she didn't deserve that.
Julia was taking steps after the divorce to further separate herself from Dalen. And from my standpoint, I know the power dynamics of a relationship, especially if a female moving on with my life. In my mind, as a prosecutor, I know that's a very dangerous time for her.
In accordance with the deal brokered by prosecutors, Dalen Ware pleads guilty to second-degree murder and receives a sentence of 15 years to life.
15 years is not enough. But you know what? He will rot in hell. Because somebody with that kind of anger and that kind of hate and that kind of evil, he deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison.
Julia's friends and family hang on to every moment they can.
I just miss her caring nature. She just wants to see the good in everybody. And I think ultimately that's what led her to her fate.
I can close my eyes and I can see her smile and I can see her laughter, and she would light up a room. Julia left a mark.
My dog's never been around the beach or the water. He's enjoying San Diego.
For Chanel, one of their final moments together stands out.
Come on. It's okay.
The summer before Julia went missing, when they walked their dogs on the beach in San Diego and spent hours enjoying each other's company.
Julia never liked taking pictures of herself, and I was always the camera person. I had came to San Diego and we were going shopping, and I was like, let's take a selfie together. And she was like, nuh-uh, you're the Miss Glam Girl, I'm not the glam girl. And I was like, take a picture. And she's like, all right. And we took this picture together. Yeah, that was my buddy.
She missed the bus just by seconds. All of a sudden, she disappears.
She harbored this hope to continue her doctoral studies in the US, but then going back to China to be a leader in her discipline of environmental engineering.
Maybe this is a situation where she was kidnapped, or she's just confused, something happened to her medically.
There was almost an exact 1 minute conversation between the driver of this vehicle and Ying Ying.
I'd like you to be more forthcoming with me because I need to find where she is. It's just a whole bit. How those people want to home safe. You know what you know what happened. Should we?
June 2017. 26-year-old Ying Ying Zhang is boldly following her dreams. She's a visiting scholar from China at the University of Illinois, conducting research on crop production.
Ying Ying got here in April of 2017. I've got a picture of Mom, Dad, and Ying Ying at the train station when she got on the train at home. to leave to come to Illinois. She was really, really interested in crop production and improving methods of crop production back in China. She's in her early 20s. She's at school. She's learning. She's happy.
Before coming to America, Ying grew up over 7,000 miles away in southeastern China. She's the oldest child in a close-knit family of 4.
Going to college, moving from 3 hours away from home was a lot. I can't imagine what it's like to move from a different country, trying to navigate life that way. I know that she did miss her family. She would call them often, and I know that they missed her a lot too.
She loved to sing, and she was part of a band called Cute Horse. She is someone who is genuinely very, very kind. She has a certain innocence to her. She was very close to her parents, especially to her mother.
Ran Gao is the father. He is a truck driver back in China. Li Fang is the mom, and she was in poor health and very fragile. Life was a struggle for them. Ying was a dutiful daughter who performed many of the functions within the household.
Coming from families with limited means, academic excellence was seen as the only way out. She did her master's degree at Peking University's graduate school, where she studied environmental engineering. Afterwards, she received a researcher position at the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Her monthly salary was 4,000 yuan, which would probably be about $700, and she would use that to supplement her family's income.
Now in 2017, Ying accepts a 1-year research position as a visiting scholar at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign.
Champaign-Urbana is a modest-sized community, small town in a lot of ways. The students travel all around town, ride bicycles. It's very pastoral. And there are a significant number of students, undergrad and graduate, from China.
Being able to go to another country, especially the United States, to pursue further studies, especially trained as a scientist, is an affirmation of personal excellence.
On June 9th, 2017, 2 months after she arrives in the United States, Ying schedules a 2 p.m. appointment to tour a new apartment.
Ying was excited to be moving, and she was meeting one of the leasing agents to tour it and potentially sign.
She has the opportunity to move to a new apartment in North Urbana, which is north of campus. And so she has to take the bus to get down to Central Campus, and she has to get off that bus and catch another bus that's going to take her north on Lincoln out of campus, where it's student housing. There's a significant number of students.
5 hours later, at 7 p.m. that night, Ying is supposed to meet a group of her lab mates for their regularly scheduled meeting. She never arrives. They call and text, but no one can reach her.
Ying was always on time, so her lab mates thought that it was really weird that she didn't show up, because Ying would never not show up to anything without notice.
I was the head of the department Ying was associated with. I was at the movies with both my sons, and I got out and I got a text from the leader of the lab group saying, I have a student that's missing, and then I gave that person a call, and I just said, have you called the police?
At 9:24 p.m., Ying's lab mates report her missing to the university police department.
This was unusual. I've never had anything like that happen with a student gone missing. We were concerned about her. We wanted to know what was going on.
University police officers check her apartment. She's not there. But they find cash, important documents and belongings, which tells them she didn't go far. While searching her apartment, officers locate her diary. They skim through its pages for clues to her whereabouts.
One of the last things that she had written in it was, "Life is too short to be ordinary." I think about that almost like weekly, if not daily. It just really shows how she wanted to continue living her life. I think it's just a really heavy thing to hear, especially it being the last entry there.
That evening, University of Illinois police make a difficult phone call to Ying Ying's family in China.
The thought of Ying Ying leaving China and coming to the United States had to be scary to the family. Then to have this happen, they were devastated.
I think the best word I could use to describe what they were feeling was horrified.
On June 10th, the day after Ying Ying was last seen, University police begin working the case as a missing persons investigation.
The University Police Department went to all the hangout places where students congregated. They searched tirelessly over that weekend for Ying Ying.
I worked at the school newspaper, the Daily Illini. I think this was such a big case, and I was just interested in it in that way as a student journalist, both of us being new to the university. It just struck me on a personal level.
The city of Champaign, it's a smaller city. There was such a tremendous outpouring of support of Ying Ying's family to find Ying Ying.
Missing posters for Ying Ying were posted on every corner. People who were on campus were basically surrounded by these posters, and her picture was everywhere.
I was on the faculty at the University of Illinois College of Law. I had a graduate course where I would teach international students the American trial system. It was devastating to us. The thought that something like this could happen on our campus with one of our students, this is crazy. This is crazy.
The search for Ying Ying intensifies.
We received a lot of surveillance footage, and we were able to trace Ying Ying's entire route.
The investigation takes a dark turn.
Another university student said she was approached by a strange individual who presented himself as an undercover police officer and wanted her to get into the car.
And a community fears the worst.
Once it's clear that she got in that car, now it's kidnapping.
Monday, June 12th, 2 days after Ying Ying Zhang was last seen at the University of Illinois, word spreads of her disappearance, shaking the quiet college community.
Police were all around looking for her, and students who were still on campus were extremely scared.
That fear increases as more details of the investigation become known. University police reveal that a check of Ying Ying's cell phone records show the last text she sent was on the afternoon of June 9th to the leasing agent for her new apartment.
At 1:39 p.m., Ying Ying sends a text saying she would be about 30 minutes late, and she ends up never showing up. At 2:38 p.m., he checks in again, seeing where she's at, but there's no answer. There's no more text between them, and the last communication anybody had with Ying Ying was with that leasing agent.
All of a sudden, the communication stops. She's just gone.
3 days into the search, university police reach out to the FBI for help.
They had been working almost nonstop for the last several days and were, in some ways, exhausted and in other ways just kind of needing some more resources. So when they called, our entire office showed up to help them with what they had on their hands.
The first move for FBI agents is to retrace Ying Ying's steps. They know on the day she went missing, she had an appointment to tour an apartment north of campus. Based on her cell data, they also know she took the bus.
She's going to come to main campus on a bus because she doesn't have a car. She's going to use public transportation.
We received a lot of surveillance footage from the metro system. The buses had a lot of cameras. And from those cameras, we were actually able to trace Ying Ying's entire route.
Federal agents scanned through the mountain of digital footage from June 9th, the day Ying Ying went missing. They get their first glimpse of her when they identify Ying Ying boarding a bus at 1:35 p.m.
You see Ying Ying get on the bus from her apartment. She smiles at the bus driver as she shows her bus ticket.
The surveillance video shows Ying Ying exiting the bus 17 minutes later at 1:52 p.m. Then she walks down the street toward another stop to transfer to another bus.
The security camera that caught Ying Ying, you can see Ying Ying trying to catch the next bus. I think she missed it by a few seconds. And then you can kind of see her in the footage, sort of like giving up and letting the bus go and probably trying to figure out what to do next.
Investigators scour these images of Ying Ying for any clues, and they see something that piques their interest. As Ying Ying waits for another bus, a black four-door vehicle drives up to her and stops.
There was almost an exact 1 minute conversation between the driver of this vehicle and Ying Ying, after which she gets into the passenger seat and that vehicle proceeds to travel off camera.
Once it's clear that she got in that car, now it's a potential kidnapping.
With the case now potentially a kidnapping, concern about Ying Ying's safety grows. Using the extensive surveillance camera system in the university area, FBI analysts determined the vehicle is a black four-door Saturn Astra sedan.
It had only been manufactured for a very short period of time. It was identifiable.
But they can't read the license plate.
Everyone within the FBI and the University Police Department was trying desperately to identify the license plate on that vehicle or some other mark that can make it highly identifiable so that way we could find it. The vehicle proceeds off of the university grounds, off of their campuses, and goes into a more residential area, and we lose a lot of the surveillance at that point.
Then a report comes in about a concerning incident on campus. On the same day, Ying Ying disappeared.
The University Police Department actually received a call from another university student, Emily Hogan, who said she was approached by a strange individual in a black vehicle on the 9th. We called her that night and she came in and spoke with us and told us all about her experience. She said this individual presented himself as an undercover police officer and wanted her to get into the car. She declined and immediately called the police.
The FBI believes it could be the same car Ying Ying is seen getting into.
I think Ying Ying was understandably really stressed with everything that was going on and was put in that situation on a seemingly safe campus, so it makes sense that she would have trusted him and gotten into the car.
We didn't know whether other people were at risk or not, whether that person could be out there, that it might happen again.
Four days after Ying Ying Zhang vanishes from the University of Illinois campus, the FBI is searching for the black car she's seen entering on surveillance video. Agents believe the same Saturn Astra approached another young woman earlier on the day Ying Ying disappeared, and the driver tried to coerce her into the vehicle.
They turned to automobile registration records for Champaign County and the surrounding counties.
Agents discover there are only 9 four-door Saturn Astras registered in Champaign County.
On the 12th, our canvas teams went in and attempted to make contact with every owner of a Saturn Astra.
Investigators track down and clear all 9 potential suspects, one by one.
There's nothing specific at that moment that would have raised any additional suspicion.
Hoping to find something that can help focus their search, something they might have missed earlier. Investigators return to the surveillance footage. Finally, something catches their eye.
Somebody noticed that the hubcap was cracked. It had a piece missing. And in zooming in, you could also see the vehicle had a sunroof.
One of the FBI agents who spoke to the Astra owners in Champaign County recalls seeing only one Astra that had a sunroof. He cross-references his list. It belongs to 27-year-old Brent Christensen.
Brent Christensen was a grad student in the physics department, a TA. He was teaching other students and earning his own degree at the same time. Generally pretty quiet and kept to himself.
Agents review the statement Brent Christensen made when they first asked him about the day Ying Ying went missing.
He said he was home that day, was sleeping, his wife was out of town, he was playing video games, and there was nothing suspicious at that time that would put any more attention on him.
Officers go back out to the apartment where Christensen lives, and the car is parked in the parking lot.
They looked at that hubcap, and it had the exact same break, the exact damage that was in that surveillance footage.
Investigators believe they've found the car seen with Ying Ying in the surveillance video. It's a major discovery, but they want to confirm it was Brent Christensen behind the wheel before they confront him. They reach out to Emily Hogan, the woman who reported that a man in a black car approached her the same day Ying Ying was abducted.
We presented her with a lineup of individuals. She went through those pictures and immediately identified Christensen as the person who was driving that vehicle on that morning. Emily Hogan's experience, her identification of Christensen, showed that he was in some ways hunting to try to find a victim. Based on the information we had, we were very confident that Christensen had in fact kidnapped Ying Ying.
Armed with Emily's positive ID of Brent Christensen, Agent Manganaro races to his house and brings him in for questioning.
Why? Right around on Saturday. I just pick a girl up. Okay. I saw her picture. I don't think it was her. Do you remember the girl's name that you picked up? No, she was in very broken English. What was her ethnicity? You said she had trouble speaking English. Well, she was Asian. She was Asian. Okay. I was just driving around. I saw a girl, and she was very distressed. Okay. So I stopped the car and looked at her. We finished her. She needed help. Talked to her for a little bit. Which I did really short. I apparently took the wrong terms compared to what she said, and that was enough to spook her. I'm not going to keep someone that barely won my car who just put me in there. So we're up. That was the last I saw her. Well,
my impression of Christensen was that he was capable of manipulation. We knew that something terrible had happened, and there was a lot of pressure. We were operating under the hope that she was still alive, maybe being held against her will by Christensen at an unknown location.
My theory is that she didn't get out of the car. I was being open with you. My theory is she was in there a little bit longer. I'd like you to be more forthcoming with me because, again, I need to find where she is. I'd like you to be more forthcoming with me because, again, I need to find where she is.
6 days after the disappearance of Yingying Zhang, Brent Christensen admits to giving her a ride on June 9th, but insists he dropped her off and hasn't seen her since.
I was safe. Sorry.
Investigators put their suspect on a 24-hour investigative hold.
I immediately set out to write a search warrant and met the magistrate judge that night while other agents were keeping an eye on the vehicle, and got that search warrant signed to go seize it.
FBI agents inspect Brent's Saturn Astra, but they find no physical evidence linking Yingying to the vehicle. The FBI is confident they have the right man, but they can't hold him without evidence.
They decide to release him and keep track of him, put him under surveillance.
We had 24-hour surveillance on him, GPS trackers on the car. We had aerial assets circling above, hoping that he might lead us to where she was at or give us some clue of a location to search.
It was a really scary time. The investigation was ongoing and nobody really knew what had happened to Yingying. This was genuinely a really scary experience for the whole college community.
FBI surveillance teams continue tracking Brent Christensen for several days, but without any luck.
At that same time, some of the other agents met with his wife and had a voluntary interview with her at her residence.
Investigators learn their marriage is anything but ordinary.
Christensen and his wife had an open relationship. They each had another girlfriend or boyfriend on the side.
Brent met his girlfriend, Tara Bullis, on a dating site in 2017.
Christensen and Tara were involved in like a domineering, submissive type relationship. From Tara's perspective, it was mutual and she still maintained a great deal of control. When we went and talked to Tara, she was very open about their relationship, was very concerned about the missing student, Yingying, and agreed to help us find out what was going on and if Christensen had any involvement. So Tara agreed to wear a wire for us and record the conversations that she had with him. In all of these scenarios, it can be a risk. We don't know if the person we're asking to help us is going to turn around and then tell Christensen everything that we just talked to them about. We don't know. But in this instance, we really needed to find Ying Ying, and so that risk was very worth it.
You have agents watching him, you have agents watching her. And, the risky thing, I think, for the FBI is that if he discovers that wire, he could harm her.
While this was going on, we also had massive efforts underway searching fields, searching dumpsters, searching parks, looking for anything that might give some sort of indication as to where Ying Ying was.
The family has this hope. They want her to be alive. And so if you have that hope, then she's going to be alive. In your own thinking, she's going to be alive. And so the Chinese community, the family, and the local community are going to have a march in support of the search for Ying Ying.
Let's find Ying Ying! Let's find Ying Ying! Let's find Ying Ying! Let's find...
The March for Ying Ying brought a lot of people in the community together and out to kind of commemorate her. And it was really emotional.
Let's find Ying Ying! Let's find Ying Ying!
The March for Ying Ying takes place on the University of Illinois campus on June 29th, 20 days after she was last seen.
Let's find Ying Ying! Let's find Ying Ying!
Brent Christensen decides he's going to participate in that march.
Christensen ordered Tara to attend that event with him. She agreed, and as she had done in her past interactions with him, wore a wire to that event.
It's 6:46 on Thursday, June 29th. We're at the benefit for the walk, so I'm thinking I'm just going to turn this on right now so that it's on while we walk.
At the event, Christensen started making disclosures to her that if the people at the event knew who he was and what he had done, they would flee in terror.
It's so weird. All those people there tonight. I want them safe, and I have no idea what happened. Nobody know what happened.
Nobody will know what happened. And nobody will know what happened.
Not even you. Like, I'm the only one.
Let's find Ying Ying! Let's find Ying Ying! Let's find Ying Ying!
June 29th, 2017. 20 days into the search for missing college student Ying Ying Zhang, students at the University of Illinois hold a march to support her. The marchers include Brent Christensen, the prime suspect in her disappearance. He doesn't know his girlfriend is wearing a wire for the FBI.
I want to see how many people were here. Sorry for me.
How is it? You feel you let nobody know?
I know a lot.
Huh?
I know a lot.
They're walking through Champaign, and he proceeds to tell her how he kidnapped Ying Ying, how he caused her a great deal of physical harm, how he assaulted her, bound her.
He was telling she looks.
She would.
What?
She fight.
Maybe she'll deal with it. Resilient. I tried to choke her. She didn't. She stuck on her back. She died. It was. Couldn't believe it. Like, he's back. Unbelievable. Like, supernatural almost how he used to.
I know Tara was very fearful throughout this entire exchange, and you can actually hear in that captured recording her heartbeat.
I choked her for 10 minutes. I release her breath. I believe it that she was out. So I carried her into my bathroom, dropped the bat, and I hit her on the head as hard as I could. And it broke her head open.
It was, in a lot of ways, a powerful moment for all of us. We knew that Christensen had kidnapped Ying Ying. We knew that something terrible had happened. And now we have him describing it.
I'm sure she did or not, so I got a knife. I couldn't laugh and she grabbed the horse.
Christensen was capable of immense violence, and he had a lot of pride in what he had done.
He ran away a little bit.
We had all been working so tirelessly over the last several weeks, the entire team, to get to this moment. We had enough to make an arrest.
On June 30th, 2017, the FBI arrests and charges Brent Christensen for Ying Ying Zhang's death.
It was a relief to make an arrest, to put Christensen in jail, but we still didn't have Ying Ying, and that was our goal. We wanted to find where she was.
When the charges are brought against Christensen, there's announced he's arrested. That's a shock. The family is hoping that he has hidden her away somewhere. It was tough. It took them a while to accept the fact that she was really dead.
Christensen's arrest brought a lot of relief to myself and the rest of the college campus. It was also really confusing of just how could somebody that I thought was teaching me something do something so horrible.
Law enforcement has every reason to believe Ying Ying is dead. They need to find her body, but Brent Christensen is keeping his secret.
He declined a second interview, so our work wasn't done. And we continued to search the area and tried to find some sort of evidence as to where she was.
Police execute a search warrant at Brent's apartment. Although there's no sign of Ying Ying, they do find evidence of an assault.
We find bloodstains on the mattress. We found evidence that blood had gotten up against the wall behind the mattress and had seeped down into the carpet. And then we find that the bathroom had been tremendously clean. We discovered Christensen had put in a work order to his apartment complex a couple days after he killed Ying Ying for the grout and the tub in the bathroom to be redone.
Investigators also locate what they believe is the bat Brent used to beat Ying Ying. They send the bat and blood samples to the forensics lab for testing.
The crime scene evidence absolutely confirmed the admissions that he made during the parade was true.
Investigators also dig into Brent Christensen's social media, where they find more disturbing information about their suspect.
He had some posts on different websites that discuss fetishes. There was one in particular that we found very concerning. It described kidnapping someone, putting them in a duffel bag, proceeding to have a sexual encounter. What was particularly disturbing was when you compared it to the Amazon purchase records of Christensen. We found a purchase of a very large green duffel bag that could easily fit a person inside it. And the realization that she was likely put into a bag just like this and carried against her will into the apartment, it hits you. It makes it real.
"21 days after Yingying Zhang goes missing, investigators have built a solid case against Brent Christensen. But they still don't have a body.
The family, there's certainly anger. There's always anger. To think that this man, in any form of brutal way, kidnapped and killed your daughter, it's beyond your ability as a human being to fathom. So the family's position was that he should receive the death penalty.
Although they know that not having a body will make it more difficult to win a conviction, prosecutors move forward with plans for the trial. On June 24, 2019, after a 2-day trial, a federal jury finds Brent Christensen guilty of kidnapping, resulting in a death. Next, the jury deliberates on his sentencing.
Of the 12 jurors, 10 voted for the death penalty, 2 didn't. And so because a unanimous verdict was not reached, her killer was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I couldn't even say how I felt. I was happy that there was a verdict and that he would go away for the rest of his life. I thought it was going to feel like the ending of a story, but it didn't really feel like there was that closure that you would get. When the verdict was initially read, emotions were really high. I don't think Yingying's family felt as though justice was served, as they were really adamant about wanting the death penalty, but instead Christensen got life in prison.
At the conclusion of the trial, the court gave authorization for me to take Yingying's journal from evidence and replace it with a copy. And I was able to give that journal to Yingying's mom.
It's all Yingying's family has of her, because Brent Christensen refuses to say what he did with her body after killing her.
He personally has never told the FBI, but he's told his attorneys what he did. And they tell us, because the trial's over, so immunity's gone, nothing else can happen. They tell us that he had dismembered the body, put her remains in the dumpster outside of the apartment building, was taken to a landfill. The area in the landfill was probably half a football field. So the likelihood of recovering her body is virtually nil.
I'm not sure if there will ever be closure for the family in that Yingying was never found.
Parents' worst nightmare is losing a child. Just think about her and how excited she was when she came here. I got kids, I got kids in graduate school, and I think about that. And, it's just, life's not fair. Bad things happen to good people, and this is a case of that.
Yingying's loved ones returned to China without their daughter. To honor her memory, they establish a memorial fund at the university, where the student body is forever touched by Yingying's final words.
Her diary entries were her conversations with herself. The last line is, life is too short to be ordinary. This kind of thinking that one makes something out of one's ordinary life in the sense of making a difference, doing something meaningful. That was something that she was probably telling herself when she was still navigating this very new country, this very strange new life to her.
At the end of the day, this is something that should have never happened, and Ying Ying should still be here.